Should be set.
All right, well, welcome back to Becca Washburn and Commissioner Fitzko. Congratulations, your new permanent title. And we're gonna, looks like we've got a presentation. We're continuing the discussion on trails. We have a presentation on the screen and presumably on our committee page as well, if folks want to follow along there. So we'll just turn it right over to whoever wants to lead off.
Yep, I'll lead off, and good morning. For the record, Danielle Fitzko, Commissioner, Forest Parks and Recreation. Thank you for having us here today to visit with you on H467. Before I go into the testimony on that, I just wanted to thank the committee for joining us last week at our roadmap meeting. It really meant a lot to FPR and all the community working on that plan. So just a heartfelt thank you for coming. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to provide just a high level overview of what we really currently have in place, really like the foundational sort of or administrative sort of framework for outdoor recreation. And then we're going to pass it to my awesome colleague, Becca Washburn, who really lives this every day. And she'll really provide sort of the meat on the bones about the work that we do. When I first came here in the very beginning of the session to kind of give you the FPR overview, I said, we are FPR, Forest Parks and Recreation. And as a committee of jurisdiction, I'm so grateful that you are taking so much testimony on recreation and trails specifically here, but it is really one of our pillars in FPR. So just wanted to thank you for spending so much time to get up to speed. It is a broad body of work. It's a lot of diversity to it. It's so many awesome players that are involved in stewarding our trail resource. I don't need to go in to tell you about the value of outdoor recreation. Becca and Jackie Dagger with our team was in here, and our partners with the Trails and Greenway Council really set a great stage about why outdoor recreation is so valuable in Vermont, not only for our economy, but for the well-being of Vermonters. I think that's, for me, one of the reasons I have fallen in love with Vermont, and I think for many people, that's the case as well. I did just want to share a little bit about FPR and our role in outdoor recreation. It is a huge body of work, but I'm really always amazed that we do it with very little capacity. I think, I was trying to count up in my head, I think we only have about 6 full-time staff that full-time focus on outdoor recreation. So a small team with a huge body of work to support all the partners and landowners in the state. One of our main areas, as you know, the state owns about 360,000 acres of public land that are accessible to all Vermonters and all visitors. That on those lands, there's at least, Becca actually shared with me today, over 1,000 miles of trails. So we have in that our state lands team only 3 staff that are dedicated full-time to recreation. And so clearly we can't do all the trail maintenance and planning ourselves. We rely on our partners to help us steward those lands, and we're really grateful for that. We also work really collaboratively with partners. We work on shared messaging. You know, right now it's mud season, so we all work together to get the message out. If it's muddy, to turn around. We also work collaboratively on just getting the message out about how to be good stewards. We recently partnered with Catamount Trail Association on creating a new Vermont backcountry ski handbook. So really a how-to guide on how to manage backcountry ski zones. We do our best to provide technical assistance, and our partners do as well. And we do a lot of grant making. So that's a big body of work that we do in FPR. I also just kind of want to now shift a little bit to what you're hearing. And I think what H467 is saying is that we're in a time of change. We have you heard and you know that we have a rich and long history of outdoor recreation in Vermont. And we also have a really strong foundation of how we approach outdoor recreation in Vermont. But times are changing. We have increased demands. We have diversification of how we actually engage on the land. And we have more engagement from people using it, but also more people engaged in businesses and stewarding it. The pandemic really brought a lot more people to using the land and getting out there and doing outdoor recreation, which is fantastic. They got hooked, and they're not going away, which is great. More people are accessing our land and getting out there. But that pressure has put pressure on our ability to be good stewards at all levels, landowners and partners. But when we look at these challenges, they are really also opportunities for us. With more people engaged as both users and supporters of outdoor recreation, I think H467 is calling us to respond to these changes. When we're looking at H467, they weren't really designed to go together, but together, I think they really do highlight some of the current and future needs that we need to address. It's calling for people capacity to lead and administer the work of both FPR and the Trails and Greenways Council. It's calling for funding to support the on-the-ground stewardship of trails, but also for greater outdoor recreation economy. And it's calling for accessibility of recreation of all forms. What I'm going to share now is a little bit of like that base framework. I'm going to highlight it, but Becca's really going to go into the details of all that, because we really do have a solid, I think, framework in place that I think we can look to enhance to meet our future needs. One of them is the Vermont Trail System. In Title 10, Chapter 20, that's our state statute to set up the Vermont Trail System. And I think it's a great opportunity to look at those statutes as a vehicle to enhance our work for the future. It establishes the Vermont Trail System. And I hate to read what the purpose is, but I think if I do, it kind of gives you a clear picture of what that system is meant to do. It's to provide access. What kind of access? We can define that maybe a little bit more. To use and the enjoyment of outdoor areas of Vermont, to conserve and to use the natural resources of this state for healthful and recreational purposes, and to provide transportation from one place to another. It is declared to be the policy of the state to provide the means for maintaining and improving a network of trails to be known as the Vermont Trail System. I think this could be a really good vehicle for us to look at when we're looking at enhancing our ability to maintain the Vermont Trail System. It also sets out the Vermont Trails and Greenways Council as designated advisory council to FPR to maintain the system, and it also provides funding. Not saying it's adequate funding, but there is funding identified in that statute. This framework, I think, provides an opportunity for us to revisit. The last time it was amended was in 1993. Could it be amended for capacity, funding, and accessibility? Possibly. Another key foundation to our work is our partners. We have the Vermont Trails and Greenway Council. I'm sure recreation's coming in now.
We have some more room on this side if anybody would like to sit on the bench over here.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Welcome. One of another foundational pieces is the Vermont Trails and Greenway Council. They are an integral partner to support FPR in administering the Vermont Trail System, but they do so much more than just advising FPR. When I came on as the interim commissioner, I think it was like the second week in that role, I met with, and also A&R leadership met with the leadership of Vermont Trails and Greenways Council. And we were talking about how things are changing and where do we need to go in the future. And we left that meeting with an agenda for ourselves. What does it look like, our partnership going forward? How do we outline like our clear roles and responsibilities for all of us as we look towards the changing environment around us? We also, what are we going to do together? What are the challenges that we need to address? And so I really look forward to continuing that work with the Trails and Greenways Council, to really organizing ourselves going forward as we try to meet these increased demands. It's really foundational to our overall success that we work collaboratively together. We also have another foundational piece with the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Collaborative, that advisory panel that was established by Governor Scott as an executive order. They are also a key partner in looking at our greater recreation economy. Combined, these two advisory panels are foundational to our work to steward our trail network and the economic engine of our outdoor recreation. Another foundational piece that Becca will share with you is our grants. We do a lot of grant making, and we want to give you the big picture of our grants that we have. There's some that are sustainable that we get every year, but in the last couple of years, we've had this infusion of one-time funds. And when we're listening to the grants that we have now, what does it look like, and what is the need for a sustainable level of funding as we look forward to the needs of our partners and communities? We've also we'll share a little bit about what we're doing with accessibility and also our partners, all types of accessibility. And they have really become part of our work. We're always thinking about how do we make trails accessible. But as we look forward, how do we really institutionalize that more? What is the current inventory of our accessible trails, and how do we continue to meet the needs of all Vermonters and visitors? I think that's the call to action that Representative Burrows set out, is how do we make sure we're institutionalizing accessible trails into the future? Becca's also going to talk to you about some real great opportunities we have coming up around planning. We have 2 statewide planning efforts coming up that'll kick off soon that will help guide us toward the future. They'll do assessments and also stakeholder engagements that will really help us try to plan out for the future. So combined, all these elements are really foundational pieces that I think we can build on together, that set a framework that we can continue to build on over time. I'm just really glad that H467 has started the conversation, this really important conversation. And I think that this bill really highlights some of the priorities that we need to be working on. And I hope we can continue the conversation, not this year, but every year, as recreation being a pillar for FPR and this committee's your committee of jurisdiction. I hope we can continue to work together for continuously improving our work. And we look forward to being partners as we understand, plan, and achieve our Vermont's outdoor recreation goals. So we have good work to do together, and I look forward to going forward in a thoughtful, planned approach together. That's sort of my overview remarks, and then the goal is now to pass it back at details.
We can pass it right over unless the committee has any questions for the commissioner. Go ahead.
So you've kind of set forth this like holy trinity of effect. It's social, it's ecological, it's economic. So I think that the social and ecological parts are kind of indisputable. The economic part, though, kind of, and that's the part you're coming to us for, is the $8 million, if I can speak kind of crassly. That $8 million, in a way, we have to justify. And so what you've put forward is that, in fact, these trails are a huge draw from the touristic, industry. So I want to know how we can measure that. And do we know if that's a set market or if that's a growing market? By increasing trail appeal, do we actually bring people who would otherwise not be on the trail into that marketplace? Or is it paying for itself, essentially, is what I'm looking for?
I'm actually going to pass it to Becca, who's our lead on this, as I'm just getting into the recreation world a little much, as Becca lives it every day.
Thanks. For the record, I'm Rebecca Washburn. I'm the Director of Lands Administration and Recreation with Forest Parks and Rec, and the newly minted chair of the VOREC Steering Committee, Mike Snyder being my predecessor there. You've heard from a lot of witnesses through the course of the session about the economic impacts of outdoor recreation, including testimony that Jackie and I provided last week, maybe as early as last week or the week before. We are third ranked in the nation as having one of the largest outdoor recreation economies compared with the total package of the sectors that contribute to outdoor recreation. I don't have the statistics at my fingertips, and I'm not technologically savvy enough to ruin the fact that I have this slide deck up. But there are other slides that you have seen that are on your website that describe the specific economic impact, what those Bureau of Economic Analysis numbers are. The only states ahead of us are Hawaii and Montana as far as contributions to the outdoor recreation economy.
Sorry, can you explain again what it is ranked third at?
The Bureau of Economic Analysis, I might not have that acronym correct, but the folks that are measuring the size of the economy only recently began recognizing that outdoor recreation contributes so much to the nation's economy that it is worthwhile to actually begin measuring this. The Outdoor Rec Roundtable and the Outdoor Industry Association were pretty instrumental in drawing attention to the need to begin measuring this economic engine. And what we found is in Vermont, the statistics that they're measuring around the economic inputs of outdoor recreation, the number of businesses, the amount of, again, this is outside my wheelhouse around talking about economics, but the key characteristics that they're measuring, the contribution to Vermont's economy is so great that the only other states where it's greater would be Hawaii and Montana.
Good.
Yeah. Does that help to answer your question?
A little bit. I guess, I'm probably asking for an analysis that isn't in reality yet, right? Like,
Right.
Are we borrowing from Peter to pay Paul? Are we taking, like the Pulteney example, are we taking people off of these trails and now they're on these trails? Are we just moving money around? Or are we actually breeding a new generation of people who want to hit trails? And are we seeing that growth, or is it coming from somewhere else?
If I step away from sort of the economic statistical segment of your question and really think about participation, it is true that participation in outdoor recreation is growing. It's growing all over the country. We are seeing it growing here in Vermont in monumental ways. We thought as the COVID pandemic sent everyone outdoors, getting their own piece of solace and feeling like they were having that bubble of healthy airspace around them, that we would see a dip after folks, kind of climatized to the pandemic and are feeling comfortable being in a room like this without wearing masks for the most part. We thought we would see a dip. Maybe we would see participation in recreation slow because folks are going back to the office and kids are back in schools, and that hasn't been the case. The numbers are showing that trailheads are still really busy, that there's an ongoing interest. I think retailers will tell you that it's still really hard to find bicycles and skis and other equipment that people want to use when they are outdoors. I also think one of the things that we have a responsibility to be thinking about, and Representative Burrows challenged us to be thinking about more, is who isn't able to participate in outdoor recreation right now because the opportunities aren't as available and accessible to them as it would be to you or I, where we could just put on our sneakers and go out in the woods.
So that could be potentially a new market we're bringing.
Yes,
absolutely. Okay. And the important thing is knowing that we can't say we just need to provide another hiking trail for that individual. It's about knowing and listening and learning, what does outdoor experience, what does connecting to nature mean to you? And what would it look like for public lands, private lands to be able to provide you with that opportunity? And in the realm of accessibility, that can look like adaptive mountain biking, that can look like story I heard from a friend at Sugarbush last weekend that was getting their butt kicked by somebody in a sit ski. Like there are a lot of recreational opportunities out there that present the full range of what it means for an individual to go out and enjoy the outdoors. And we are only beginning to crack the nut of what that looks like, both from an opportunity to bring BIPOC individuals into this space, as well as folks that either have cognitive or physical disabilities that prevent them from being able to hop out of their car at a trailhead and go for a hike. So we are learning so much about what it means to be able to provide these opportunities in a way that represents what they're saying they want versus what we think they need or should have because of our own personal experience.
I'd just add also that when we're thinking about our landscape, 75% forested and wanted to be good stewards, recreation is a great gateway to get people connected to our natural environment and want to be good stewards going forward. So we want to bring even more people out on recreating and on our trails so that they can get that connection and want to keep forested and want to be good stewards. So it's the more we can get youth out on the trails, it's fantastic because they are the next generation of caretakers.
I'll just say before we let you go on and actually get into the presentation, I definitely don't want to speak for either of you, but just something you said, Representative Templeman, $8 million. I'm not sure that the department is here advocating for a dollar figure or even for the bill itself or any of the bills specifically. They didn't emanate from the department. So just, we're all bearing that in mind. But.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. I think if we've answered the question effectively, maybe I would jump into, I think they're great questions. I'm so pleased to know that, you know, the range of witnesses that you've heard from are beginning to help the significance of outdoor recreation and special opportunity it presents to this committee in particular. So I'm thrilled to hear the caliber of questions that are coming up and love that we're here to be able to answer some of those. And also that we get to be a showcase for schools. This is really cool. And maybe they'll enjoy participating in this exercise. I would bet that Mariah did a fantastic job of helping you sort of imagine yourself in the woods, thinking about outdoor recreation and all of what goes into it, but I'm going to bring you back there. I think it's humbling and helpful to take ourselves out of the sort of complicated conversations about economic figures and numbers that might be requested to maintain this special opportunity and this economic driver in Vermont, and just think about our own favorite trail. This happens to be mine. I think that Representative Lipsky probably knows this well. I have to keep from calling you Jed. This is my favorite place. When I think about recreating, this is a place that's special to me. And I think it's helpful to sort of go through the exercise of thinking about imagining your own favorite trail. You're out with your family, your dog, maybe you're by yourself. Whose land are you on? Good question. Not a lot of people when they're out recreating necessarily know the answer to that question. And sometimes it doesn't matter, and sometimes it does. Who's managing the trail that you're on? Who made sure that that parking lot was plowed? Who made sure that there was a sign at the trailhead telling you how to participate in that trail experience safely? Are there other types of recreation that might be welcomed and encouraged on that property? Hunting, mountain biking, horseback riding, skiing, snowshoeing, depending on what you're participating in. Encounter different people doing different things on the trail. And what does it mean to consider the trail type that you're on? Are you on the long trail? Are you hiking end to end? Are you encountering end to end hikers? Are you in like a fabulous network like what this picture represents, the top of Kimmers in Stowe, where you have like a great network of trails that's actually connected to a larger network of trails that's then connected to a larger network of trails. Being aware of all of these different characteristics of what it means to actually go out and enjoy a trail experience is a helpful reminder every once in a while to think like, there's a lot that goes into this experience that I'm having that I really have to work hard not to take for granted. You know, when we leave our driveways in the morning and we drive to work, we expect the road to be clear, that we'll be able to use a traffic signal and our traffic lights will be working and that everything will make sure that I get safely to work. And we don't really think a lot about all the people involved in making sure that that's a safe trip to work. The same can be said of the experience of trails. And in an even more significant way, understanding that there are a range of different ownership patterns that allow for that network of trails to exist and to thrive here in Vermont. And that is something that is particularly unique to Vermont because we aren't out west where there are vast tracts of land that are owned by the federal government. They are part of the mix here, but they're just part of the mix. There are so much of our beloved trail network that is on private land, including the trail that I'm featuring here as one of my favorites. So I offer that up as a way to just think about and connect with what's the experience we're actually talking about, and what does it mean for us as decision makers, as land managers, as new commissioners. This is a really exciting thing to get grounded and situated in what we're actually talking about. So moving on from there, as Commissioner Fitzko was describing, the Vermont Trail System is one of the more exciting statutes to read in Vermont's set of statutes. And I think because it's a good reminder, sometime back in the 80s and 90s, there were a group of thought leaders imagining what it meant to sanctify the importance and significance of outdoor recreation and trail-based recreation in Vermont. And the statement of purpose says it all. It's important to provide access, connectivity across land ownership types, that trails are a public purpose. And now in modern times, this becomes a very important thing. Any of you may be familiar with Rule 71 and the significance tying to Act 250 that the members of the Vermont Trail System benefit from. This is where that comes from. Trails are a public purpose. They're important to Vermonters and visitors to Vermont. This is also the way that we make sure that we have access to federal recreation trails funding. And I'll go into that a little bit more in a minute. And then again, because of the nature of this bill and relationships to transportation funding, there are sections of it that refer in particular to rail trail opportunities and wanting to emphasize the development of those rail trail opportunities wherever possible. Danny went into the fact that this statute also established the Vermont Trail System. I think you did a great job of describing what that is. It's just a recognition of the important role that trails play in Vermont. The council, again, fabulous partner that you've heard from a lot this session, and can really see what a coalition of outdoor recreation organizations informing and helping guide where recreation goes in Vermont in ways that support that holy trinity that you were talking about. And I'm borrowing that, I wrote it down. And then also establishing the Recreation Trails Fund. This is what Danny was describing as the source of funds that are enabled through statute. This is a portion of off-highway vehicle gas tax revenue that comes through the transportation fund. It's capped at $370,000 right now. And that goes in and provides a variety of opportunities and purposes on behalf of the department that I'll go into in a little bit. Any questions at this point? Do we need to go back and revisit our favorite trail? I put this chart together just as a way to illustrate, and this is not meant to represent the full breadth of outdoor recreation grant making in the state. Our partners over at the Agency of Commerce and Community Development have grant programs that see a lot of themes related to outdoor recreation with respect to planning and larger infrastructure opportunities. So don't take this to represent the only funding coming into Vermont and being invested in outdoor recreation. This is what Forest Parks and Recreation has the great privilege of being able to administer out of our office. We have one recreation trails grant manager. We have Jackie, who you met when we were in talking about the VOREC Collaborative. She's actually our executive director of that steering committee that at the same time she was being hired, learned that she was going to have the opportunity to administer $5 million worth of grant making. So we have cobbled together a way to administer what turns out to be a pretty significant amount of money. That's a combination of federal and state sources, one-time funds, and recurring funding. The Recreation Trails Grant Program is about $1 million a year. It's the combination of that state Vermont Rec Trails funding as well as federal fuel tax revenue that comes through the Federal Highway Administration. There are a number of different types of activities for which Recreation Trails Grant funding can be invested on the landscape. The way we use it, we take a portion of it and we care for the trails on state lands, and we take a portion of that and create a competitive application process where municipalities and nonprofits can request this funding. The federal requirements and the state requirements both have proportions that need to go to different kinds of recreation. And the way that plays out for us here in Vermont is 40% 40%, I'm going to botch math because I'm doing it under pressure, but a proportion of it goes to motorized recreation, a proportion goes to non-motorized recreation, and then the remainder of that goes to multi-use. So there's a good chunk of this going to support our vast trail system, VASA's ATV trail opportunities on private lands, as well as the full range of multi-use and single-use trail opportunities. The Land and Water Conservation Fund. Before I move on, Recreation Trails has an 80-20 match requirement. So communities coming in and requesting this funding have to show 20% match. One of the things that's in our budget right now in Forest Parks and Recreation's budget is an opportunity to use some of the surplus general fund to create that match opportunity for rural communities that might have a harder time raising that match. So we're looking at how, if we're successful in securing that $1 million match opportunity, how would we use that in the next grant cycle to make it apparent to smaller communities that we have a solution for them if they're struggling to raise the required match. With the Land and Water Conservation Fund, this is a program that's been in existence since 1964. We can thank Senator Leahy for being one of the champions of this program. It brings about $2 million to the state each year. This is off-highway or offshore oil lease revenue. A portion of that revenue goes to paying for recreation opportunities. And again, you can see a range of different eligible investments. And I don't know, I used to try and count the number of places that I drove by between work and home that saw investments from Land and Water Conservation Fund. And it's a useful exercise to really understand the impact of this investment over that period of time, 1964 to now, just tens of millions of dollars being spent rehabilitating pools, acquiring town forests for communities, building trails, rehabbing playgrounds, putting playgrounds in for the very first time. There are so many different ways that the Land and Water Conservation Fund has shown an impact here in Vermont and across the country. This is a 50-50 match program. So this, again, is another opportunity where we would use that $1 million in match funding to help rural communities that might struggle to come up with that match. And look forward to finding ways to make sure that access to this money is equitable for folks. The VORC Community Grant Program, I struggled to figure out what the best way was to illustrate the trajectory that this grant program has seen. I think when Jackie and I were wrapping up our testimony last time, there was a question about the origin story of the VORC Community Grant Program. We didn't have a lot of time to go into that at the time. And I think the key pieces to really think about when we think about where the community grant program has been and where it finds itself now is, at the time, $100,000 request was to help establish a pilot. We had 5 pillars that you heard from us last time represented: stewardship, access, economic vitality, health and well-being, and growing the extent and the quality of outdoor recreation. And what we wanted in this grant program was to identify, are there a couple of communities out there with some really discrete investments that could demonstrate they're a model outdoor recreation friendly community? With these investments, this will bring them over the hump of being able to say they represent each of those pillars in the way that outdoor recreation contributes to their economy. And we wanted a couple of pilots. We chose Newport and Randolph. And the thought was, following this investment, creating these models, we would get metrics and deliverables and tools as outcomes that we could then pass along to other communities that might be looking for their own form of outdoor recreation as a well-being driver, addressing that holy trinity that you referenced. We got that. We have great outcomes coming from those 2 projects. We know that in Randolph in particular, they are doing an economic analysis of the impact of that investment. And we had no idea that we would have the kind of success. We shared with you last time just how much interest there was on behalf of the different communities around the state that saw outdoor recreation as one strategy, one solution to help make their economy a little bit more resilient to some of the turbulence that we've been experiencing. And here we are today with 2 consecutive years of one-time funding at $5 million. And while we have learned that we went from thinking that we were creating a pilot for a designation program, that we would invest our energy in replicating the tools that were developed from those 2 pilots and building from there, has turned into the state of Vermont telling us, we see so much opportunity here. We have our own brand of what outdoor recreation means to our community, and we need the help figuring out how to connect those dots. And you heard from Jackie and I when we were last in talking about some of the ways that we're proposing to pivot the way this grant making is happening so that it's reaching communities more effectively where they are. If they're in the planning process or they're in the implementation stage, what does it mean for us to present that sort of on that continuum, an on-ramp for every community that has an interest in exploring this and needs an investment, needs that boost. So I think while we aren't coming with a specific request around the amount of funding that would be meaningful, we have heard that funding is meaningful, and to have that flexibility and to be accessible in a way that sometimes federal funding has been challenging for communities. So this is something that I think one of the goals for us is getting something in place that would be sustainable and would allow for communities to build and plan and design their outdoor recreation resources and ideas around knowing that there's a source of funds to help get them there. And then our one-time funding, I was excited for the opportunity, and I hope to be able to speak with Representative Burrows about exactly what she said. There's tons of money coming into the state. Recreation was identified by all of us as an amazing investment for the surplus funding. And what does it mean to put that money to work in the right places? At the time in the fiscal year 2021, what we were doing is we were reacting to that huge surge in use of trails and our inability to get out and maintain them. You might remember we were worried about being even outside close to one another. We were designing trail crew work in ways that people could stay 6 feet apart. How do you build a bridge, put in a stone staircase when you have to be 6 feet apart from your crew partner? You can't do it. So we didn't get out and do a lot of that work. And as a result, we saw a huge amount of impact. So the $1 million, Commissioner Snyder was a strong advocate for taking a portion of this funding and making it available to municipalities and nonprofits that saw some of the same pressures that we did. Like, wow, that parking area really got pounded. We could use some money to get it back up into shape. The other thing that we really wanted to emphasize was access. The whole premise behind this $1 million was giving municipalities and nonprofits a boost to get back to ground zero with where they need to maintain trails and to act on some of those innovative and creative ideas around accessibility. And boy, did we ever see them. We funded about 12 projects with this $1 million. We saw a trail go in at a senior center. We saw adaptive mountain bike trails. I'll show you. This is Saxon Hill. I rode there on Saturday, and the bridges they're fabulous. These are just amazing opportunities, adaptive biking opportunities. A lot of this was a result of having those funds available to make investments around the state.
Representative O'Brien had a question, I think, on the other earlier grant program on the back.
Oh, sure. This is one of the things that I'm going to acknowledge. Oh, here we go. Right here.
Just quickly on the Land and Water Conservation Fund, does that have caps, or is it pretty much as much match as we can come up with, the feds will match it?
So we get about $2 million a year, and we split that again. We make a competitive round every other year. So we're typically providing about $2 million to applicants. We recommend, because of how cumbersome the grant making process is with a federal partner like the National Park Service, our recommendation is bring us a project of the scale that is commensurate with the work required to secure one of these grants and administer one of these grants. So a $200,000 project would bring $100,000. So that there's no cap on each project. You could bring an acquisition project for $1 million and be asking the National Park Service for $500,000. We have a certain amount that is allocated based on national calculations of the proportionate share of that the offshore oil lease revenue that comes to the Land and Water Conservation Fund.
We use $2 million every year.
We do. We use it for a lot of parks infrastructure on state land. It underwrites a lot of land acquisition work. We made an addition to Albert Dunes State Park just this past year to the tune of about $500,000 from the National Park Service. So we are using it. We're a little light on staff capacity right now and haven't hosted a community grant round in a couple of years and are due to do that. So we have a surplus of that funding building up right now, and inquiries coming in every day asking, when is this grant opportunity going to become available? We have lots of really great ideas. So yes, this is an important funding source. One piece of it that I didn't mention that I think is significant for anybody that's received it, and certainly significant for us as administrators of the program, it's perpetual in the sense that it doesn't put a conservation easement on your property or result in public ownership, but it does come with what is a federal term is a 6F encumbrance on it. And essentially, if the town of Waterbury puts in a park and then 30 years later says, gosh, we really need a spot for our fire station. I'm saying this because this actually happened in Waterbury. We really need a spot for our fire station. Wouldn't it be great if we put it at Hope Davey Park? And the National Park Service really frowns on this. They say, we made an investment in outdoor recreation in your community, and it was this acreage, and we want that acreage maintained or enhanced in your community. So if you're going to convert it to a fire station, then find us some equal or better land somewhere else in town that will be opened up for public access. So it's no small commitment to accept land and water conservation funds to support the infrastructure in town. So it's a great question. Other questions before I move on? I think what I wanted to do is just share a couple of photos. One of the last Land and Water Conservation Fund grants we made was to the city of Burlington, Oak Ledge for All. This is a playground rehab that is in process right now. This is a rendering of what the outcome will look like. This might be one of the first fully accessible playgrounds in the state of Vermont. This is really I have goosebumps thinking about what this means for children and families that will be able to experience being in a park in a very new way. And I hope that we see lots more of these applications coming in. Tucker Mountain in Newbury is a Rec Trails grant recipient, just showing the artistic flair and this trailhead amenity. Again, going back to a couple of these pictures from around the state, I chose to deliberately focus on some of the accessibility investments that our funding has contributed to around the state, but there are a lot of different types of projects that this funding has gone to make a reality for folks, from mountain bike trails, improvements to vast trails, ATV trails on private land with VASA. There are just innumerable examples of ways that communities have been able to make investments that look like the kind of weekend trail experience that we all love. Danny mentioned a little bit of this, but I'll just go through what it means as FPR as a landowner. Again, 360,000-ish acres that the agency owns, of which a portion of that is managed by Forest Parks and Recreation. We have roughly 1,000 miles of trail on state land. We have a team of experts that Danny alluded to that are responsible for the planning, management, partner relationships, adjacent landowner relationships, everything that goes into making sure that experience accessing the outdoors is a pleasant one for all involved. And I think one of the things I'm particularly proud of when I think about the way we structure our work is that it isn't just recreation staff thinking about what recreational assets should be looking like and how to make decisions about where they go on state land. We have an interdisciplinary team of staff that are looking at this. We have watershed planners, wildlife biologists, fisheries biologists, ecologists, foresters, recreation managers, all thinking about, okay, we want to put a trail in at Perry Hill in Waterbury. What does it look like to do that responsibly? Because our mission isn't just about outdoor recreation. It is about outdoor recreation and sustainability and protecting the natural resources that we depend upon for this outdoor recreation. So it's exciting. Nationally recognized as having one of the best structures for making informed decisions about management on public lands. Really exciting thing. And that extends to our long-range management planning, where we're essentially going through a public engagement process and assessment process that results in a series of activities that are likely to take place over the 10-year period. And then each year we go through an annual prioritization process. We look at the amount of money that we have available to put to work across the state on roads, trails, parks infrastructure, and we say, all right, how far can we make this go based on safety and safety being the highest priority, new opportunities around that access and equity being another really high priority, and maintenance when looking at, if not maintained, will it result in closure and shutting down opportunities for users? And what we find time and time again is that about 80% of our funding is going to maintaining that 1,000 miles of trail and the road networks that are similarly supporting that public access. So just a staggering and amazing statistic that we've become increasingly aware of as we're trying to do a better job of putting this money to work in the places that need it most. Anything you want to add to that, Danny, knowing that in your former role as the director of forests, you did a lot to help oversee and support the staff that were responsible for this?
Good.
Just gratitude.
Big body work.
I just have a couple more slides. Again, wanting to direct folks' attention to how Forest Parks and Recreation in particular and others around the state and really around New England have elected to make information about trail opportunities available to members of the public. Trail Finder is a nonprofit organization that we partner with and help to support their efforts to make sure that everybody has access to trail opportunities close to their home. Again, sort of calling ourselves back to the experience of COVID, where you might recall VOREC in particular was instrumental in helping create guidance for folks that were staying home, trying to stay safe and wanting to get outdoors safely. We had a point at which we were talking about trying not to have people going more than 15 miles from their house. And many of us may have our favorite trail. Kimmer's, my favorite trail, is further than 15 miles from my house. So wanting folks to be able to use Trail Finder to say, you can go to Trail Finder and ask, like, here's where I am, what are within like a 10-mile radius, a 15-mile radius, what are the trail opportunities there? And a lot of people were making new discoveries. Oh, I had no idea this opportunity existed. So just an amazing resource for us right now. Of course, everything is all about mud season. But I wanted to point out that there is a query feature for accessible trails on this site. And I think what it tells us is there's a lot more work that needs to be done. And I'll pivot to the planning work that we have ready to launch and how that's going to contribute to it. But just wanted to illustrate here really quickly that we have some ways of making sure that these opportunities are obvious and accessible to folks, but we have a lot of work to do. State Parks similarly make sure that folks that are interested can filter on the website for universal accessibility, whether that's a picnic pavilion, a lean-to, a handicap accessible bathroom, making sure, again, that that type of user has the opportunity to figure out, where can I go and connect with the outdoors. This is just a wrap-up slide. Hopefully, Representative Pearl, maybe you see yourself here in the photo.
My predecessor is in there, but
Nice. This is in Danville. We did the governor's announcement of the last round of VOREC trail grant or VOREC grants at the train station, which was receiving grant funding. Very cold, windy day, but lots of enthusiasm and excitement rallying around what it meant to, at the time, it was $200,000 we were thrilled to be able to make available to communities. We made 7 grants that year. This is just to call back attention to those 5 pillars and to point out that SCORP, the statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan. This is a statewide planning effort that any state that participates in the Land and Water Conservation Fund program needs to keep this up every 5 years in order to be eligible for that funding. This plan also serves as our action plan, our trails action plan that allows us to continue to receive the federal recreation trails grant funding from the Federal Highway Administration. So these are really important planning efforts. A 5-year cycle is a quick planning cycle for a small state like ours. We are working on what it would look like to make this a more meaningful and engaging process for not just those of us that regularly participate in outdoor recreation, but that community of residents and visitors to Vermont that we were talking about at the commencement of this conversation that may have an interest and aren't finding those opportunities available to them. So wanting to do a better job with our SCORP planning to invite in that and give us the opportunity to listen and hear about what we're missing, where are the gaps, and where does this work need to really be emphasized and really highlighted. And I think the VOREC action plan, which you heard from Jackie when we provided testimony, is another place where the SCORP will provide that overarching, these 5 pillars of opportunity to develop strategies and activate a network around the specific actions that can help us support the advancement of outdoor recreation with these 5 pillars in mind. And I think it's a good opportunity to just round out the conversation, pointing out that we, in activating that network, believe that these planning processes will help all of the recreation community, whether it's a municipality, a recreation partner, an outdoor recreation business, understand their place in this picture of what the vision for outdoor recreation in Vermont looks like in the future. We have the Trails and Greenways Council, which is particularly poised to help support and understand stewardship, quality and extent, access for all, health and wellness. We also have the Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance that similarly sees themselves really helping drive the economic vitality and tourism aspects of our outdoor recreation economy, as well as the different ways that businesses and the outdoor industry interface with the other 5 pillars. So really just seeing ourselves, as Danny described, in a really important point in outdoor recreation's history and future, and so pleased that this committee is interested in and taking the time to have us in to talk about and share so much of what it means to be thoughtful about advancing outdoor recreation in our state. And I think with that, we can pause for any questions.
So I'll ask one question anyway, and I know it's after 12, so I don't want to keep anybody too much longer, but at this point in the funding process, is the department, regarding the VOREC grants, is the department advocating for funding for next year?
For FY24, no.
Yeah, okay.
No, we're about to launch the $5 million for this current fiscal year, and we'll have plenty on our hands to be able to make sure that funding is administered effectively.
And I think
What's the timeline for that? Getting grants out?
I think our goal is to be able to launch the timeline and make guidance and instructions on how we've kind of pivoted the approach by the end of this fiscal year.
And I think long-term, when we're looking at our granting, the one-time investments are great, but looking for a more reasonable, sustainable source of funding going forward.
Okay. Representative O'Brien.
So Sarah Pelkey was on earlier.
Yes.
And Representative Rice and I were just talking about, it makes sense for towns to have like this, what is it called, the recreational Coordinator, right. Is it the same at VORAC? Like, could you, with a couple more full-time employees, you know, does it just economically make sense? Like for every employee at 100,000, we bring in 500,000, you know, just because we can coordinate or get grants out there.
Yeah.
That fuels everything, the Holy Trinity.
I think there's a logic behind what you're describing. And when we interface with colleagues from around the country, we do see a trend towards like, gosh, you know, the state of Utah, you know, distributes this much money and they have this staff size. Massachusetts, a state that we're actually scheduled to be having a conversation with about like, how do you do this effectively? I think our goal is in establishing what a sustainable amount of money to be distributing around the state on a regular basis, right sizing our staff to that. We're not thinking that we need to scale up to a scale that's commensurate with $5+ million a year. But what is that right size? And right now I would say we're undersized. Even if 5 million shrinks back to something else, we're still a little undersized compared with what we see in other states. And that's only in the grant making realm. I think if we, you know, had the rest of the day to talk about outdoor recreation and Forest Parks and Recreation's role in that, we could share all kinds of stories about the other staff that are carrying just an amazing, inspiring workload, but a pretty heavy workload.
Particularly on state lands management.
Yeah.
Let's take one more question. Representative Lipsky.
Yeah, thank you. When you talk about Hawaii, Montana, and Vermont as the top 3% of state GDP from recreation, are we including uphill alpine ski
Yes.
contributions to that economic piece?
Motorized.
Other states.
Motorized, RV sales, boats, all different types of recreation, outdoor recreation are contributing to those
And I
numbers.
think our number is 4.2%.
Yeah, I think it was 4 something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty amazing.
All right.
Thank you for the time.
Yeah, why don't we wrap it up there because we don't have all day, unfortunately.